ለመማር ወደ ትምህርት ተቋም መሄድ ግድ አይደለም።
ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
ራሳችሁን ከኮሮና ቫይረስ ወረርሽኝ እየጠበቃችሁ በቤታችሁ ወይም በተመቻችሁ ቦታ
በኢንተርኔት አማካኝነት በኦንላይን ትምህርታችሁን መከታተል ይቻላል።
ካናዳ ከሚገኘው ኢንተርናሽናል ኤር ትራንስፖርት አሶሲዬሽን አያታና
ከእንግሊዙ ኢንስቲትዩት ኦፍ ኮመርሻል ማኔጅመንት ICM ጋር በመተባበር የሚሰጡ ትምህርቶችን ተከታትላችሁ በ6 ወር ጊዜ በዓለም አቀፍ ደረጃ ተቀባይነት ያለውን የስልጠና ማስረጃ ባለቤት መሆን ይቻላል።
ከኢትዮጵያ ሲቪል አቪዬሽን ባለስልጣን ሙሉቅና ባገኘንባቸው የፍላይት ኦፕሬሽን እና የሆስተስ ስልጠናም በምዝገባ ላይ ነን።
ጥያቄና መልስ፣ የክፍል ስራዎች ብሎም ፈተና መፈተን ክፍል ውስጥ እንዳላችሁ አይነት
ልምድ ባላቸው መምህራን እየተማራችሁ
በኦንላይን ባላችሁበት ቦታ
አድራሻ ከ22 ማዞሪያ ወደ ሾላ ገበያ በሚወስደው መንገድ 150 ሜትር ገባ ብሎ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ
ህልሞን እውን ያደርጋል።
Good afternoon, can you hear me? Yes.
Good afternoon.
Okay, I think it is better to start. In our previous class, we have seen about the nature of capital structure theories and the nature of lease financing. Today we'll see an example of lease financing by using hypothetical numbers. So let's see whether leasing or buying an asset is advantageous for companies. Assume this cash flow is given. Consider a firm that wish to acquire a delivery truck from a lease company, for a leasing company, a company who wants to acquire a delivery truck. The truck is expected to reduce costs by $4,500 per year. As a result of using that truck, there will be cost saving that is an advantage for the company. And the truck costs $25,000. This is a purchase price of the truck and has useful life of 5 years. And if the firm buys the truck, they will depreciate it a straight line to 0. That means the value of the truck will be reduced equally. For example, if the cost is $25,000, if the economic life is 5 years, 25,000 divided by 5 is the annual depreciation. That means, so at the end of the economic life, at the end of the estimated economic life, the value of the truck will be 0 because it will be depreciated straight line. And they can lease. The second option, they can lease it from 5 years. They can lease it for 5 years from a leasing company with annual lease payment of $6,250. So there are two options. The first option is purchasing it. If the company wants to purchase the delivery truck, the purchase price is $25,000 and it will depreciate annually. If the company prefers to lease the asset from a leasing company, no need to purchase the asset, and we have to pay monthly annual lease payment of $6,250. Having this, let's see the cash flow of buying. If the lessee is interested to buy the asset, let's see the cash flow. The first cash flow is the purchase price. The purchase price of the asset, the purchase price or the cost is $25,000. So there will be negative cash flow for the lessee. The lessee must pay $25,000 to purchase the truck. And when it is a cash flow from year 1 up to 5, it is the estimated economic life of the asset. There is saving as a result of using the delivery truck. There is $4,500 saving. But we have to consider the after-tax saving. So the tax rate is 34%. Is given, 34% tax rate given, and there is $4,500 saving as a result of using that delivery truck. But we have to see the after-tax saving. The after-tax saving will be 4,500 times 1 minus the tax rate. It will be 2,970. This is after tax saving. And there is also depreciation. Sorry. There is also depreciation. The depreciation is the estimated economic life is given. The cost is given. It is 25,000. If the depreciation method is a straight line, 25,000 divided by 5. So the annual depreciation will be 5,000. 5,000. So this 5,000 depreciation. It will be reported as expense. It is expense for the company. So it will be deducted from the taxable income. So there is tax saving. There is tax saving. So the tax saving is this expense amount times the tax rate. So the tax saving is 1,750. It is an expense, but there is tax saving because that expense is deductible from the company's taxable income. So this is a cash flow of buying. So the total cash flow will be at year 0, or the initial purchase price is 25,000. From year 1 up to 5, there is 4,670 cash flow. Actually, this is annual cash flow. So these are cash flows. If the company, the leasee is, if the company is interested to lease the asset, to buy the asset, sorry. The other option is leasing. Leasing. If it is leasing, there is no cash flow at year 0. No need to pay cash. So at year 0, there is no cash, but simply there is lease payment. The annual lease payment is given, is negative 6,250 annual lease payment. So it is an expense for the leasing. That is a total expense, but there is the tax advantage for this. So the lease payment is the after-tax lease payment, or the after-tax expense is 4,125. After-tax expense is this one. And after-tax saving, if we lease it or buy it, the after-tax saving is the same. The after-tax saving is 4,500. The total is given. And the after-tax saving is 4,500 times 1 minus tax rate. It will be 2,970. So look, don't get confused. In the case of depreciation, we multiply the depreciation amount by the tax rate because it is not cash. Depreciation is not cash expense. Depreciation is not cash expense. We are talking about cash. Depreciation in the first place is not cash. It is an expense, but non-cash expense. It is simply decrease in value of fixed assets. The only cash flow is the saving, tax saving. We only use this one, 5,000 times 0.34. In the lease payment case, the total amount is the cash expense. This cash expense, the after-tax cash expense is 4,125. So the total cash flow, if we lease it, is negative 1,155, the annual cash flow. Year 0, it is 0. There is no cash flow. But the annual cash flow is minus 1,155. These are cash flows in these two options. If we buy, if we lease. And let's compare these cash flows. Cash flows, leasing instead of buying. If we lease, the cash flow is minus 1,150. To buy, 4,670. Leasing instead of buying. There is advantage. The tax saving, 25,000 tax saving is 0 if we lease it. I mean, it is advantage for the company. No need to pay cash. So if we lease it, we can use that cash in other areas. We can invest it in other productive areas. So it is advantage. From year 1 up to year 5, when you see the annual cash flow, if we lease it, it is 1,155. To buy it, 4,670. Lease instead of buying. Cash flow of leasing minus cash flow of buying. It will be minus 5,825. This is the annual cash flow of lease instead of buying. Lease instead of buying. It will be minus 5,825. Buying instead of leasing. Reverse this. Buying instead of leasing. If we buy, this negative cash flow is there. Cash flow of buying, the annual cash flow of buying is 4,670 minus negative 1,155. It will be positive 5,825. So these are cash flows in the two options. Cash flow of leasing instead of buying and buying instead of leasing. So however we wish to conceptualize this, we need to have an interest rate at which to discount the future cash flows. We have to discount these cash flows because the cash flows are in different periods. These are annual cash flows in year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. So these are annual cash flows. So we have to calculate the present value of these cash flows. The present value of cash flow of leasing instead of buying, and the present value of cash flows of buying instead of leasing. So that rate is the after-tax rate on firm's secured debt, or the after-tax cost of financing the purchase. The after-tax cost of capital, we can call it. Hope you are familiar with cost of capital. After calculating present value, we can calculate NPV. What is present value and what do you mean by net present value? Do you remember this? What do you mean by present value, and how can we calculate present value? Are you with me? How can we calculate present value? Is there anyone who can answer this? Okay, we've seen this in the first chapter. Present value, it is future value over 1 minus tax rate, the power of t, time. Okay, so that question or to answer?
To answer.
Okay,
to answer the question, doctor.
Okay.
Okay. To calculate the present value, we can calculate future value divided by 1 plus I, the power of n. N is number of years. R is rate.
Right. The discount rate, yes. What about a net present value?
Yeah. Net present value will be the difference. The present value of the future minus the present value of the present. Net present value.
Okay, the present value of future cash minus the initial investment. This is the NPV, net present value, just to remember. So let's calculate the NPV of leasing instead of buying. Leasing instead of buying. The cash flow is calculated, and it is, the cash flow is minus 5,825. This is annual cash flow, and it is equal for the year. So you can calculate the cash flow for 5 years, for the first year, for the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth year. So there is advantage. There is an advantage, opportunity cost. If we lease it, we'll have no need to pay 25,000 cash. So this is advantage if we lease it. We can consider this 25,000 as an advantage, as the initial investment. We can consider it as advantage, and the present value of cash flows, annual cash flows, sum of present value of cash flow in the first, the second, the third, and the fourth and the fifth year. It will be minus 219.2. You can calculate it. Minus 219.2. This is the present value, I mean the net present value, 25,000 minus the present value of sum of the cash flows in 5 years. So the net present value will be 219.2. Let's calculate the net present value of buying instead of leasing. If we buy, the cash flow is negative initially, and the annual cash flow is 5,825 positive. So the same. NPV 25 minus 25,000 minus present value of this 5,825. So it will be positive 219.2. Positive 219.2. So what will be your decision? Is that leasing or buying? If you are in a position, which alternative is preferable for the company? To buy the asset or to lease it? What do you think? What do you think? What will be your decision if you are in a position? If you are interested to lease the asset, your net present value is minus 219.2. If you are buying instead of leasing, your net present value will be positive 219.2. So which alternative is preferable? Buying or leasing? Is there anyone who can answer this? Are you with me? What will be your decision if you are in a position to decide these alternatives? Okay, Dempsey, welcome.
I think leasing is better.
Why?
Because the initial investment in here is negative.
Buying, yeah, the initial investment is negative, yes.
Yes,
but
yes.
Your decision criteria must be
So
the net
if
present value. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah.
Your decision criteria must be by comparing the net present values of these two alternatives.
Okay. So if the initial investment is negative, that means our initial investment is greater than our present value. So the project cannot be contribute here.
Actually, the decision is the negative sign indicates the outflow of cash initially. To buy, the company must pay cash, 25,000 cash. That is why the sign is negative. But after purchase or after the initial investment, there are cash flows. So the initial investment should not be the only criteria to decide. You have to see cash flows after the initial investment, and you have to compare the initial investment cost with the cash flows subsequently. So look the NPV. The NPV of leasing is negative, and the NPV of buying is positive. So remember the decision criteria for this NPV. It must be positive in case of project analysis. To select a project, the project by using NPV criteria, the NPV must be positive. So in this case too, the NPV is positive for buying. So the appropriate option is buy instead of leasing, because your net present value will be positive. If you lease, the net present value is negative. The initial investment is positive, but the outflow, the cash outflow after the initial investment is greater than the advantage of leasing, that is cash saving, 25,000 cash saving. So simply the decision is buy. Is that clear, Damsa?
Yes, doctor, it is clear.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the decision is buy. Another concept that I have to understand later to leasing is debt.
Question,
Okay.
sir.
Okay.
What is the number of T we are using here? 5 years?
5 years, yes.
1.05 raised to 5 or what?
Which one? Are you referring to
1.05 5,825 over 1.05 over T. Mano raised to T.
Yes.
Are we using 5 or T represents what?
Time.
5.
Number of years.
5 years or what?
5. This is 5. This is 5. Present value.
5? 5?
Sum of the present value of cash flows.
The maximum.
Yes. The first year. For example, to calculate the present value of this 5,825 for the first year, make it 1. For the second year, T will be 2. The third, T will be 3. The fourth, 4. The fifth, 5. Sum of this.
የዛ ሁሉ ድምር ነው። አሁን 5825 ለ1.05 ሬስ ቱ 5 አድርገን ነው 219 የምናገኘው ወይስ?
Actually, do you remember the annuity chapter 1 ላይ ያየ ነው? በአንዩቲ ፎርሙላ መስራት ይቻላል ተመሳሳይ ስለሆነ። ወይም ደግሞ በዝም ብሎ ሲምፕል ፕሬዘንት ቫልዩ ፎርሙላን ለመጠቀም ከሆነ future value over 1 plus I the power of n ነው ወይም t ታይም ማለት ነው። future value ማለት በየአመቱ ምናገኛት እቺ 5825 የመጀመሪያዋን አመት ካልኩሌት እናደርጋለን the power of 1 አድርገን ሲደመር የሁለተኛው አመት ሲደመር የሶስተኛው ሲደመር የአራተኛው ስለዚህ ቲን እየቀያየርናት እንሄዳለን ማለት ነው እና የአምስቱንም እንደምረዋለን።
ኦኬ እቺ 219 በ5 በማብዛት ብቻ የምትመጣ አይደለችም ማለት ነው።
አይደለም 219ማ ኤንፒቪ ነች ኔት ፕሬዘንት ቫልዩ ፕሮጀክት
የሁሉ ሰሜሽን ነች እንጂ
አዎ ሰሜሽንም ብቻ አይደለችም ከኢኒሻል ኢንቨስትመንቱ ጋር ያቀናነስ
እሱ ገብቶኛል። አዎ እሺ
ያው ኦኬ if you have another ጥያቄ ካለ Okay, another issue related to this is debt displacement and this valuation. Considering the issue of debt displacement allows for a more intuitive understanding of the lease versus buy decision. So, lease debt displacement. This is a hidden cost of leasing. If a firm lease, it will not use as much regular data as it would otherwise. That means we can buy the asset by borrowing money from finance providers. Then we can lease it. So we can perform analysis by considering this debt displacement. So this issue, debt displacement, this can help us to better understand the lease or buy decision. Buying the asset by accessing finance from debt. The cost of debt will be added in the cash flow. So the nature of cash flow will be different. So you can consider this analysis in this way too. And our above example is considering buying the asset by the company itself without access by using internal source of finance. But this and buy decision can be performed by considering the amount of debt required to purchase the asset. And this you can perform the analysis in such a way too. And another issue that you have to understand is the advantage of lease for the lessor. in our above example, we consider the analysis in the leasee side, leasee company side. For the lessor or the asset owner, if it is negative cash flow for the leasee, that means it is positive for the lessor. You can see the above example. It will be the opposite of the leasee, the opposite of the leasee. That means, for example, the cash flow of the lease is negative 219.2. This is for the leasing company, the company using the asset and paying periodical lease payment. For the asset owner or the lessor, this is advantage. So you can take in this way too. If it is disadvantage for the leasee, it is advantage for the lessor. So leasing has its own advantage. So this one, you can consider the analysis in the lessor side, the asset owner side. The above example is on the leasee side, the asset user side. So leasing is advantageous for the lessor company or the asset owner. So it will be positive. The cash flow or the NPV will be positive for the lessor. So leasing pays for companies. So use as a business administrator, you have to think in both ways. Sometimes you'll be in the lessor company side, sometimes in the leasee company side. In these two sides, there is gain. If there is advantage for one, there is disadvantage for the other. It was negative cash flow for the leasee, it is positive for the lessor. So leasing pays. Okay, this is all about the chapter. There is exercise. Try to see this. If you have any question in this chapter, please ask. If you have any question. This is exercise for you with answer. Try to do that. If you have any question, you are welcome. If you have any question.
ይቅርታ ዶክተር።
Okay.
ሞገስ ይባላል። ወደ አንድ ስላይድ ሁለት ስላይድ ትመልስልኛለህ?
ሶሪ ይሄኛ ኤክሰርሳይዝ ነው።
አዎ አይ ከኤክሰርሳይዙ በፊት ያለው ማለት ነው። እዚህ ጋር ማለት ነው። እዚህ ጋር አሁን እኔ ዲፕሪሲዬሽን ከድሮም ጀምሮ ልናቅ እንችላለን፣ ይገባኛል። ሊዝ ፔመንት 1250 ከየት ተጨምሮ ነው እዚህ ጋር የመጣው? ቀድምም 4500 አልገባኝም። የሆነ ላጠና ፈልግና ትምርቱን ማለት ነው ካልኩሌት ላድርግ ጀምርና የሆነ ቦታ ላይ የተዘለለ ነገር ይሁን አይኑር አላቅም፣ ግን አይመጣልኝም።
መሃል ላይ ነው
አይገናኝልኝም። ገብቷል? አይገናኝልኝም።
ኦኬ ቆይ ሶሪ 6000 አሚን 5000 እና 6500 ከየት እንደመጣች ነው?
6250 አሁን ከየት መጣች? እቺ
5000 አንስታታል ከየት እንደመጣች?
5000ማ ያው 25000 ለ5 ሲካፈል 5000 ይሆናል። ዲፕሪሲዬሽን ቫልዩ እሱ ችግር የለም። እቺ 6250 ግን ሊዝ ፔመንት ከየት መጣ?
ተሰጥቷል እኮ ከላይ። ሶሪ
ተሰጥቷል።
ጊቨኑ ላይ አለ።
እሺ አይ በቃ ችግር የለም። ከተሰጠ ችግር የለም። አንብቤ ለነዛ ይችላል።
ያው ችከታቻለ።
እሺ አዎ
የተያዘ ስለሆነ እንትን ሚስ እንዳትለው። 4500 ትራኩን ስንጠቀም አድቫንቴጁ ተብሎ ተሰጥቶናል። ፐርቼዝ ፕራይሱን ተሰጥቶናል። ስለዚህ እንደ ጊቨን ማለት ነው። እሺ ከዚህ በኋላ እሰራዋለሁ። Okay, good. If you have another question.
በትምህርት ከፍ ብሎ መብረር ይቻላል። ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ከከፍተኛ ትምህርት አግባብነትና ጥራት ኤጀንሲ ሙሉ ዕውቅናን ባገኘንባቸው በማስተርስ ዲግሪ ኤምቢኤ በስትራቴጂክ ማኔጅመንት፣ ኤምቢኤ በባንኪንግ እና ፋይናንስ፣ ኤምቢኤ በቢዝነስ ሊደርሺፕ፣ ኤምቢኤ በሪስክና ኢንሹራንስ፣ ኤምኤስሲ በኢንተርናሽናል ትሬድ እና ኢኮኖሚክስ ዘርፎች በእውቀት ለመቅረጽ የበቁ ፕሮፌሰሮቻችን አረንጓዴ መብራታቸውን አብርተዋል። በነገራችን ላይ በኬንያ ሀገር ከሚገኙ ስመጥር ዩኒቨርሲቲዎች በሚመጡ ፕሮፌሰሮች የትኩረት መስክ ትምህርቶቹ መሰጠታቸው ልዩ ያደርገናል። በምርጥ የትምህርት ስርዓት የተገነባው ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ በመጀመሪያ ዲግሪ በአቪዬሽን ማኔጅመንት፣ በሆቴል ማኔጅመንት፣ በአካውንቲንግና ፋይናንስ፣ በማርኬቲንግ ማኔጅመንት አስተማማኝ ትምህርት ይገቢውና ራስዎንና ሀገሮን ይለውጡ። አድራሻ 22 አደባባይ ወደ ሾላ በሚወስደው መንገድ ላይ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ህልሞን እውን ያደርጋል።
The fourth chapter is working capital management. So the course is designed in line with basic financial decisions. The first one is investment decision. We have seen this, that investment decision. After investment decisions is financing decision. We have seen financing decision. Capital structure, this financing, these are part of financing decision. And it is also, there is also working capital management. It is also part of financial decision, right? Working capital management. And it is critical for managers. Managing working capital is critical. And let's see what do you mean by working capital first. There are different definitions for this working capital. The first one is net concept or net working capital. Current asset minus current liabilities. The gross working capital is firm's investment in total current asset. And I hope you are familiar with current asset and current liability. Current asset means a resource that will be consumed by the company or that will be converted into cash within a short period of time, usually within a year. It includes cash, receivables, inventories, and other marketable securities. For example, if there is treasury bill, if the company purchases treasury bills, that is short-term investment. So there are current assets that will be converted into cash within a short period of time. And there are current liabilities, obligations of the company that will be paid within a year. So the net working capital is current assets minus current liabilities. The gross working capital is total current assets. There are arguments whether the net concept or the gross concept is appropriate. We'll see that. Working capital management is the administration of firms' current assets and financing needs to support those current assets. So as a manager, you have to strike a proper balance between your current assets or cash and other cash equivalents and your current obligations. You have to pay for the purchase of raw material, for example. You have to pay for salary. You have to pay for other short-term obligations. There are current liabilities. For these activities, your current asset, including cash and other cash equivalents, must be enough to cover those obligations. So working capital management is managing these two, current assets and their financing needs. Let's see the conceptual framework of working capital management. It involves the control of flow of financial resources circulating in the enterprise. Financial resources. Assume you have a manufacturing company, assume you will have cash. You have to use that cash to purchase input. You have to process, you have to sell, and you have to generate cash. These are flows of resources. The nature of resource flow will be different in different companies. We'll talk about that. So you have to manage this and management of current asset and current liabilities in short. And it may be defined in two ways, as I have seen, gross concept and the net concept. And gross concept, the total current assets, that means the net concept, the difference between current assets and current liabilities. Which one is logical? Let's see. The argument that supports the gross concept or economic concepts of working capital definition. It defines working capital as total current assets. Working capital is the total current asset. No need to focus on the net amount. Now, the argument is profits are the result of total assets. The company generates profit by using total assets, including current and long-term or fixed assets, not the net part. The company is not using the net asset to generate profit. For example, there will be building, there will be cars, there will be furnitures, machineries, and others. Those resources will be employed to generate sales. So the company is using the total resource, regardless of their source of finance. So defining working capital as total current asset is logical. The other argument is every increase in fund increases working capital. For example, if there is sales and if the company generates cash, there will be increase in cash. If there is borrowing, there will be increase in cash. So every source of finance will increase working capital, regardless of its source. So no need to separate the liability, the liability portion of that current asset. So it is better to define working capital as total asset. The other argument is management is more concerned with total current assets regardless of their source. You as a manager, you have to manage your assets regardless of their source. So what is the need to focus on the net amount? No need to deduct your current liabilities from the current assets. So this is the argument in line with the gross concept, or defining working capital as total current assets. When it is a net concept or the accounting concept of working capital decision or working capital definition is, it is contrary to the gross concept. Working capital management involves management of individual assets, individual current assets, current liabilities, and interrelationship that links them, because in the long run, what matters most is the net amount. What matters the most ultimately is the net amount. You have to balance total current liability, current assets, and your current liabilities. Ultimately, our concern is the net amount. And for creditors and investors, what is important is the financial soundness of the enterprise. So if there is no proper balance between your current asset and your current liabilities, for example, what will happen if your current liabilities are greater than your current assets? Or in other words, let's define the current assets portion narrowly. Assume the current asset is cash. What will happen if your company's cash balance is lower than the current obligations? What will happen? Is there anyone who can answer this? What will be the problem if your company's available cash balance is lower than your current obligations?
Bankruptcy?
Okay, but bankruptcy, ultimately there will be. That means if there is no cash, there is no input. You are not able to purchase input, raw material, labor, and others. If there is no input, there is no process, there is no output, there is no sales. So the company will face difficulty to repay borrowed fund with interest, and it will lead to bankruptcy. Are correct? So you have to strike a balance between these current assets and current liabilities. And as an investor, for example, you as an investor or you as a manager, you have to check the financial soundness of your company. The company must have enough cash to pay for short-term obligations and to purchase input. So it is better to define working capital as the difference between current assets and current liabilities. And even for management, what is required to meet obligation is the excess amount, not the total. You as a manager, you have to satisfy your obligation, and there must be enough resource for that. So you are concerned with the net amount, not the total one. So it enables comparability among firms. Comparability. Instead of looking at the total figures of current assets, if we see the net amount, the net working capital, that means current asset minus current liabilities, it is possible to compare companies. For example, assume there are two companies, company A and company B. If you are assume the current assets for company A, let's say 10 million, the current asset for company B is, let's say, 12 million. Which company is financially sound, do you think? Which company is financially sound? Company A, 10 million current asset. Company B, 12 million current asset.
Company B.
Company B. It seems, but it is difficult to compare because we don't know the level of current liabilities. For example, let's ask current liability. Current liability for company A, assume it is 4 million. Actually, it has some disadvantage. We'll talk about that. 4 million, and for company B, let's assume 10 million. So the net working capital for company A is 6 million. The net working capital for company B is 2 million. Which company is good, financially sound?
A.
It seems A. If we are using the net amount, we can compare 2 or more companies. If we are simply looking the gross amount, 10 million and 12 million, it is difficult to compare companies. Actually, we'll talk about that. Having excess cash will have its own disadvantage. We'll talk about that. The net concept makes companies comparable. So why is working capital management important as a manager or as a business administrator? What is the need to focus on the working capital management of your company? The reason is, one, working capital management is essential for the long-term success of a business. If there is no enough working capital, the company will face difficulty to purchase input. If there is no input, there is no process, there is no sales, the company will bankrupt. So the long-term success of the company will depend on the working capital management. And no business can survive if it cannot meet its day-to-day obligations. So if we are not meeting day-to-day obligations, if we are not paying for input, there is no process. So we have to satisfy day-to-day obligations to be successful in the future, even to survive. So working capital is critical. A business must therefore have clear policies for management of each component of working capital. You should have clear policy in your company. And usually companies face difficulty to pay salary. It is common in our country because your working capital management is not clear. So you should have enough cash to pay for salary, to pay for short-term obligations, to purchase input and others. So corporate executives devote a considerable amount of attention to management of working capital because it is critical. And there are different types of working capital. In our company, we can have permanent working capital or variable working capital. Permanent or variable. When we say permanent, we can set a minimum level of investment in current assets that is required to continue operation without interruption. Consistent growth in working capital. So we can call it hardcore current assets. If we are setting variable working capital, the amount of investment required to take care of fluctuation in the business activities, and also called circulating or transitory working capital. Better to see it graphically. If it is permanent, actually in the business organization, there will be growth. Growth is expected. So there is time, there is amount of working capital. So we can make it consistent, straight line, consistent increase. Permanent current assets. Our level of current asset will be permanent, permanently grow. If it is variable, this one, this is the green line. Variable, increase sometimes, decrease the other time, increase, decrease, increase, decrease. Variable working capital. So it will vary based on our company's seasonal requirements. So in our company, we can have variable or permanent working capital, depending on the nature of the business and considering other issues. It is possible to say it's permanent current asset or variable. So when you say current assets, depending on the nature of the business, there are different types of current assets. For example, raw material, if it is a manufacturing company, raw materials and other packing materials, work in process, or partially completed goods. Goods in the manufacturing process, those are partially completed. Finished goods, goods processed and completed and waiting for sale. Stores, spare and fuel, receivables sold on account and they will be received in the future. Cash in the company, in the bank, loan and advances provided by our company. They are assets. Loans and advances given by the company to its employees, for example. They are assets. Current liabilities, obligations of the company. It includes accounts payable. For example, if our company purchases raw material on account, it will be recorded as accounts payable. Purchasing raw materials without paying cash, agreeing to pay cash in the future, it will be recorded as payable, accounts payable. Unclaimed dividend, unclaimed, if there is dividend already decided and not yet paid, it will be recorded as a liability. Unclaimed debenture, interest warrants, if there is interest accrued and waiting for payment. If it is not yet paid, it will be recorded as a liability. Short-term loans that the company accessed will be a liability. Cash credit from banks, provisions for taxation, proposed dividend for common stock and preferred stock. These are not only, but simply know the definition. Current asset means a resource owned by the company that will be converted into cash within a short period of time. Current assets. Current liabilities, these are obligations of the company, and those liabilities will be paid by the company within a short period of time. So current assets are resources, current liabilities are obligations. So resources must be enough to cover obligations. So are you with me? Are you with me? If you have any question, you can ask.
How about the credit by the bank cash? እንዴት liability ሊሆን ይችላል? አልገባኝ።
ከባንክ የተበደርነው ብር ማለት ነው።
Credit by cash, credit by bank አንድ ስላይድ
from banks.
Cash credit from banks.
It's a liability.
ለማን ለካምፓኒው?
አዎ አሁን እያሰብን ያለ ነው እኛ የቢዝነስ አድሚኒስትሬተርስ ነንና በቢዝነሱ ሳይድ ሆነን ነው የምናስበው። ስለዚህ ካምፓኒው ከባንክ ቢበደር
ወይስ ለቢዝነሱ ገባ ነው ምንድነው?
ቢዝነሱ ከባንክ ቢበደር ማለት ነው። እሱ ሊያቢሊቲ ተብሎ ነው የሚመዘገበው። ወደፊት ብድር ነው።
ኦኬ ክሬዲት ክሬዲት እኔ ወደ አካውንት የሚገባ ነገር ነው የማውቀውና ለዛ
ወደ አካውንት ማለት
ወደ ብድር አካውንት ሳይሆን ወደ ኖርማል አካውንት የሚገባ አርጊ ስላሰብኩት ነው።
አካውንት ባይዘው በአካውንቲንግ ብዙ ዲፊኒሽን አለው። አካውንት የሚለው ቃሉ በራሱ ወዴት
ሎን አካውንት አለ፣ ሴቪንግ አለ፣ ከረንት አለ። እሱ ችግር
በባንክ ላይ ያለውን ቡኩን ነው አካውንት እንትን።
እንደዛ አስቤ ነው።
በአካውንቲንግ ደግሞ እያንዳንዱ ነው። ለምሳሌ አካውንት ሪሲቨብል አንድ አካውንት፣ ካሽ አንድ አካውንት ተብሎ ነው የሚመዘገበው።
ኦኬ
አካውንቲንግ ኤንድ ፋይናንስ ፎር ማኔጀርስ አልወሰዳችሁም?
አልወሰድም።
አካውንቲንግ ፎር ማኔጀር አይ ዶንት ኖ ካሪኩለም አይኖር አላውቅም። ቤዚክ አካውንቲንግ ማለት
አይ
እዚጋ ቤዚክ ፋይናንስ እያወራን ስለሆነ
እውነት ነው።
ሲምፕሊ ከረንት ሊያቢሊቲ ማለት በቢዝነሱ ሳይድ በአጭር ጊዜ ድርጅቱ መክፈል ያለበት ነገሮች ናቸው።
እሺ
በዱቤ ከገዛ ዲቪደንድ ተወስኖ ካልከፈለ፣ የሰራተኛ ደሞዝ ደርሶ ካልከፈለ፣ ታክስ ካልከፈለ በአጭር ጊዜ የሚከፈሉ ግዴታዎች ናቸው። ከረንት ሊያቢሊቲ
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, let's see the cyclical flow and characteristics of working capital. Actually, the working capital flow depends on the nature of the business, based on the nature of the enterprise. There are manufacturing companies, there are merchandising companies, there are service-giving companies. The main process in manufacturing companies: input, process, output. That means we have to pay raw material, we have to process it, and we have to sell it to generate cash. In merchandising company, we purchase goods and sell those goods by adding some markup. Service giving, rendering service to generate cash. So the niche of the business is different. Manufacturing, merchandising, financial or service. In a manufacturing company, for example, if there is cash, we have to purchase raw material. After purchasing raw material, there is process here. We have to add labor and overhead. After processing, there will be finished goods. Those goods are ready for sale. We can sell it on account. በዱቤል እንሸጠው እንችላለን። ከዛ በኋላ ካሹን እንሰበስባለን. This is the operating cycle in a manufacturing company. Using cash to purchase raw material, processing those raw materials, and producing finished goods. Those finished goods will be sold on account. If they are sold on account, it will be recorded as receivable. After that, we can receive cash. This is the flow in manufacturing company. If it is merchandising, a merchandising company buy goods from manufacturers or other merchandising company and sell those goods. There is no manufacturing. ገዝቶ የሚሸጥ ተቋም. This is the main process. So in a merchandising company, we use the cash to purchase merchandise inventory and sell those merchandise inventory on account usually and collect cash. This is a flow. Using cash to purchase inventory, selling the inventory to generate cash. If it is service giving company, the cycle is short. Render service, cash will be used to render service and generate cash. So cash, receivables, cash, cash, receivables, cash. Even the receivables is low in service giving company. For example, if it is a consultancy firm or if it is a bank provides service and usually receives cash. A consulting firm provides service and receives cash. The cycle is short. For example, if it is a consultancy firm, the firm hires employees, purchases resources, and render service. If it is consultancy, provide consultancy service. After giving that consultancy service, it will be credit size. After that, cash will be collected. The cash conversion cycle is short in service rendering firms. So you can see the cash collection cycle or in manufacturing enterprise is long because the process is long. Purchase raw material, process, sales, and the likes. Compared with manufacturing firms, merchandising firms' cash conversion cycle is low. That means the time required to convert cash into cash is low in merchandising company. Comparing service giving companies with merchandising and manufacturing, the cash conversion cycle is low. So this is the nature of the operating cycle in different firms. Okay, if you have any question. Okay, let's continue. Let's see the characteristics of capital. And from the above cyclical diagram in manufacturing, merchandising, and service giving, we can identify three important characteristics of working capital. One is short lifespan. In manufacturing, actually it is long. Sometimes, depending on the nature of the business, maybe greater than 1 year. And usually, this cycle is lower than 1 year. So there is short lifespan. And swift transition from the other. For example, swift transition from cash to receivables, from receivables to cash, or cash to inventory, from inventory to receivables, from receivables to cash. The conversion cycle, this one. Cash will be converted into raw material. It is another current asset. This current asset. Raw material will be converted into finished good. This is also current asset. This finished good will be converted into receivable. Receivable will be converted into cash. Swift transition is here. The same is true for merchandising. Cash to inventory, inventory to receivable, receivable to cash. So there is swift transition. Now, efficient management of one form cannot be undertaken without simultaneous consideration of the other. It is not possible to manage only cash. For example, let's get back. For example, to manage your cash, you have to be able to manage your inventory. You have to be able to manage your receivables because they are connected. Cash will be converted into inventory. Inventory will be converted into receivable to cash. So it is difficult to manage cash separately and to be successful in our company. And assets from synchronization of activity levels. That is, if activities like purchase, production, sales, payment, and collection can be synchronized, working capital management will have been simple. So we have to synchronize the activities within the cycle. We should not focus on only one activity to be successful, to have efficient and successful working capital management in our company. When you see the determination of working capital, there are different approaches to determine the working capital required to run a business. It means we can determine the amount of cash that our company needed. The industry norm, the economic modeling approach, and strategic choice approach. These are the commonly used approaches to determine our working capital. We can use the industry norm, economic modeling approach, strategic choice approach. And actually, the specific factors, when you see the specific factors that will influence the optimal working capital, whether we use the economic norm or whether we consider the economic issue or the strategic issue in our company, there are specific factors that will determine the amount of working capital that our company needs. One is the nature of the firm's activity, the industry health, the nature of the firm's activity. For example, some firms generate cash frequently, some firms generate cash maybe once a year or 2 years. For example, if the asset is with huge cost of manufacturing, if the asset needs more time to manufacture, usually the cash flow is not frequent. Sometimes some firms generate cash frequently. For example, service-giving companies collect cash frequently. So those companies will have different level of working capital. The amount of working capital will be different in different firms. So the firm's activities determines working capital. The other is the industry health of the country. In different countries, some industries may be in a good health, booming or increasing, growing. And sometimes some industries may be at declining stage or will be affected by different issues. So we have to see the industry health as a time of determining our working capital. If our industry is healthy, if the industry is growing, that means it is easy to generate cash. So no need to have more cash, no need to own more working capital. That means. But if the industry is not healthy, we have to be careful. And availability of the material under consideration, availability of resource, for example. Sometimes resource may be easy to access, and no need to have cash to purchase resources. We can have credit purchase. In this condition, no need to have more cash. And sometimes it will be difficult to get resources. So the availability of material will affect our working capital level. The money market condition, if there is. Money market means a financial market in which short-term securities will be traded. For example, if there is financial market, the action ገበያ in America, there will be money market. In that money market, short-term securities will be traded. It will be easy to sell negotiable instruments by the company to generate cash. But in our country, unfortunately, the money market is not well developed. And if there is cash, and if there is money market, we can purchase that cash, that monetary instrument. For example, there is government treasury bill. That is short-term instrument. It is part of money market instruments. If there is excess cash, we can purchase instruments like treasury bills. In the short term investment, we can generate additional return for the company. So it is easy to borrow money, short-term, easy to access short-term source of finance if there is money market. It is easy to invest if there is money market. So the money market condition in the country will affect the level of working capital that our company needs. If there is no well-developed money market, we have to maintain, or we should have more working capital. The amount of working capital must be high, because it is not easy to access additional short-term financing. So the influence of operating cycle is paramount too. The operating cycle means the amount of time required to convert cash into cash. In manufacturing, cash, raw material, finished goods, receivables, cash. This cycle will affect our company's level of working capital. The nature of the business, service giving, manufacturing, even manufacturing, different types of goods will be produced. So different level of goods will have different sales frequency. So it will affect the amount of time required to generate cash by the company. So the nature of the business will have influence on the level of working capital. Management's attitude towards risk. If the management is risk-taking management team, the level of working capital will be low, because risk-taking managers want to invest cash to generate additional return. So their level of working capital will be low. So the management's attitude will affect the optimal working capital. Growth and expansion of the business will affect our optimal working capital. Production policy, position of the business cycle, term of purchase and sales. These all will affect the amount of working capital that our company wants to maintain. So you have to consider these are to set our working capital, optimal working capital. So working capital means managing current assets and current liabilities. When you say current assets, it includes receivables, cash, inventory, and other marketable securities. We'll see specific management activities for each working capital components. In the first part, we'll see how to manage receivables. Before that, if you have any question. Okay. If you have no, let's see how to manage receivables. Receivable means if our company sell goods on account, or we can call credit sales, selling goods or rendering service without collecting cash. At that time, it will be recorded as receivable. So as a manager, we have to be careful in managing receivables. Why do firms grant credit? Why credit sales? Not all do, but the practice is extremely common. Companies sell goods or services on account. And why credit sales? Because it is the obvious reason is that offering credit is a way to stimulate sales. Our sales will increase if there is credit sales. And the costs associated with granting credit are not trivial, but they are significant. So we have to be careful. The costs associated with credit sales. For example, the first cost is customers will not be able to repay their credit purchase. Simply. The other is the firm has to bear the cost of carrying the receivables. There is cost of managing that receivable. We have to hire employees that will follow these receivable activities. Other material resources will be required, so there is carrying cost. So the default is here, the carrying cost is here. So these are costs associated with credit sales. So the credit policy decision that involves a trade-off between the benefits of increased sales and the cost of granting credit. So if we grant sales, if we grant credit sales, there will be increase in company sales. That is a good sign. The firm's value, or the share price, will increase if there is increase in sales. Actually, this is not the only factor that will influence share price, but it will have positive effect. But if there is increase in sales as a result of credit sales, there is the cost of that credit sales. The probability of default is one. That means customers will not be able to pay. And the other is cost of managing that receivables or carrying the cost. So we have to strike this balance. And related to receivables, there are common terms that are commonly used in receivables. One is term of credit. The other is creditworthiness. The other is collection policy. Term of credit includes credit period, setting the credit period, discount period, cash discount period, and type of credit instruments. We have to know all this. And what credit period means the amount of the number of years given to buyers to repay their credit purchase. Credit period. Cash discount means sometimes we can give buyers cash discount to facilitate early payment. Type of credit instrument. What type of instrument? For example, there will be negotiable instrument like notes receivable. We can have written agreement, and we can have other forms. So we have to assess the creditworthiness of the buyer. Analysis distinguishing between good customer and bad customer. Good customer, a customer who can easily pay. Bad customer, the customer who will default. We have to be able to analyze it. There are tools we'll see. And we have to set our collection policy. The efforts expanded on collecting receivables. Receivable management involves this. Term of credits, assessing creditworthiness, having collection policies. Credit period means it's the basic length of time for which a credit is granted. This part is simply descriptive. Try to understand what do you mean by credit period. And the credit period varies widely, but the common practice is from 30 to 120 days. 30 days or a month to 120 days, or 4 months. This is a common practice. There is no hard and fast. And if a cash discount is offered, then the credit period has two components. That is the net credit period and the cash discount period. The net credit period is the length of time the customer has to pay, and the cash discount period is the time during which the discount is available. Two parts will be there. It is commonly written in this way, with 210 and 30, or net 30. This will be, you can read this like this. There will be 2% cash discount if it is paid within 10 days, but the net credit period is 30 days. 210 and 30. So up to, if the buyer pays the bill within 10 days, 2% will be discounted, but the net payment date is 30. So these terms will be easier in our credit sales. And at the time of setting the credit period, we have to consider different factors. Factors like the nature of goods, perishable goods with low collateral value. If our company's goods are perishable, the credit period is usually low. Number of days given to the buyer is low, less. That means the payment must be within a short period of time. If our company's product demand is low, we have to increase the credit period so that we can increase sales. Low customer demand, higher credit period. Low cost, low profitability, and high standardization, low credit period. High credit risk, so the risk of uncollectability, credit risk. If the risk of uncollectability is high, the credit period must be low, because it will exacerbate the uncollectability risk. ያለመሰብሰብ እድሉ መጀመሪያ ስንሸጠው ከፍ ያለ ከሆነ ክሬዲት ፔሪዮዱ ማጠር አለበት። high credit risk, low credit period. Small account size, low credit period. Because the higher the credit period, the higher the default risk. Competition, if the industry is competitive, we have to reduce our credit period. I mean, we have to increase our credit period. We have to give buyers extended period to pay their debt. Customer type depends. It depends. For some customers, the credit period may be long. For some customers, may be lower. Usually, if the customer's relationship between the company, if it is good, we can extend the credit period. If it is not, the credit period must be short. So these are some of the factors that we have to consider at the time of setting the credit period. Cash discounts. Cash discounts are offered to customers who purchase goods on credit as incentive to speed up collection. To facilitate early payment, we can give buyers discount. So this will have the effect of reducing the amount of credit being offered, and first must trade this off against the cost of discount. There is advantage of giving discount, early collection, but there is also disadvantage. That means if the discount is increasing significantly, it is reducing the amount of cash collected by the company. So there is advantage, there is disadvantage. So another reason for cash discount is that they are way of charging higher price to customers that have had credit extended to them. If customers pay within a short period of time, we can give them deduction. If the period is extended, the amount of payment by those customers will be high. So charging higher price to customers with extended credit period is one way of charging higher price. And another issue in credit management is we have to assess credit eligibility. This may not be desirable to grant credit to all customers. So we have to be able to analyze, and we have to be able to understand good and bad customers. And these are the traditionally used ways of analysis: capital, character, collateral, capacity, condition. Actually, in short-term liability case, there is no high standardization of analysis and tools. For example, if a manufacturing company is interested to purchase goods from a supplier, there will be analysis, but collateral and other issues are not as such significant. For example, if it is bank loan, a bank requires collateral. But in short-term working capital management, collateral will not have a such significant effect. But we have to say the capital, character, collateral, capacity, and conditions of the buyer or the credit customer. Before giving credit to a customer, we have to say these all. Capital means the financial position of the applicant. You can see financial statements. You can see the assets, liabilities, equities from the financial statements. You can see the cash and the availability of cash and its obligations. Or in other words, you can compare current assets with current liabilities or liquidity. Before providing loan to others, you have to see financial position. You have to compare the company's current assets with current liabilities. Financial position, capital. Character means willingness to pay. The buyer's willingness to pay the debt. You have to ask questions like this: how does the applicant's history of payment look like? Has the firm defaulted to other trade suppliers? If there is history like this, the willingness is poor, that means. If the history of the loan history or the history of the buyer is not good, that means its character is not good. It will have negative effect on credit rating. Does applicants management make a good phase effort? Sometimes there will be default, but we have to see the management's good phase to honor debt as they become due. The management's commitment to satisfy obligations. We have to see these all. Simply we have to understand the willingness to pay. Or in other words, character. Capital, character. Collateral means the collateral. If there is that can be used as a backup for the credit sales. For example, if there is building, if there are machineries, and simply if there are real assets, those assets can be used as a collateral. If there is collateral, or if the loan is backed by collateral, the risk is low. So you can see the collateral, the availability of collateral. For example, if there is no real estate, there is no real estate for a company, a buyer, still, if you are interested to give for that company a credit, it is risky. The default risk will be high. So you can see the collateral. Capacity means management's capacity to run a business and applicant firms' plant capacity, availability of resources, machineries and other space capacities, human resource capacity, and the likes. The management's capacity to run the business and the applicant's plant capacity must be assessed. Condition means maybe economic condition. Economic condition in the applicant's industry. In different industries, economic conditions will have different effects. So see the economic condition of the industry and the general economic condition. The economic condition in the country, not specific to the industry. And the scope for failure and default is high when the industry and the economy are in contraction phase. If the economic condition is not good, providing credit is risky. So we have to see the condition before granting credit. And the other issue is where you have to say the collection policy. Collection policy. The collection policy is a final element in credit policy. So it involves monitoring receivables to support trouble and obtaining payment on post-due accounts. So you should have collection policy. You have to monitor receivables, and you have to be able to identify receivables having high risk, high default risk. Or in other words, you have to spot trouble, and you have to be able to obtain past due payments. For example, if the credit period is 30 days, if it is not yet collected, it is past due. If it's not collected within 30 days, it is past due, and your company must have a system, a policy, how to collect this past due receivables. So in monitoring receivables, you have to ensure that customers make payment as per the credit term, and in event of any deviation, corrective actions are taken. You have to take corrective actions. And possible reasons to deviate from payments. That means if the credit period is 30 days, it's 30 days. If the buyer is not paying the bill within 30 days, the buyer deviated from the agreement, that means. Now, possible reasons may be changing customer business activities, changing the business condition of the customer. Because of that, the customer will face a difficulty to pay within the agreed period, or maybe inaccurate policy forecast will lead to deviation from the agreement, maybe improper policy implementation. Improper policy implementation in our side, maybe. Because of these and other reasons, there will be deviation from the agreement. So the monitoring system begins with aggregate analysis and then move down to account-specific analysis. That means start from your total credit sales and come to the specific credit sales. Sales to this company, specific with dates. Sales for this company, the total credit period and the past due dates. For example, if the agreement is 30 days, and if on the analysis date, assume it is 40 days, the 10 days past due, that means. So we have to implement a monitoring system that will analyze these all. Start from the aggregate analysis and come to the specific account analysis. So the simplest form of analysis is comparing sales and receivables. Sales. What was our total credit sales? What was our total sales? And what was the portion of receivable from that sales? Total sales includes cash sales and credit sales. በካሽም በዱቤም የተሸጠው total. Receivables refers to credit sales. You can start the analysis from this point. Compare your total sales with receivables. And computing collection period, accounts receivable over credit sales per day gives a better view. Computing the collection period, average collection period. See, know the average collection period. Aging of receivables. Aging means try to analyze the age. That means past due. For example, if the sales for credit sales for company X is 10 days past due, still it's not collected. Sales for company Y, 20 days past due. Aging of receivables. Analyze the age. So collection period and age analysis may give misleading picture when sales are seasonal sometimes, but still they give us a good starting point for receivables management. If the age is long, that means the risk of uncollectability is high. If the receivable is past due, the risk is increasing. The risk of uncollectability is increasing. But at the time of aging analysis, you have to know the nature of your business. Sometimes the business sales may be seasonal. Sometimes the business sales may be consistent throughout the year. So you have to be careful at the time of aging analysis. So in order to address the problem, we can use either ratio of receivables to original sales or receivable variance analysis. If aging gives a misleading result, depending on the nature of the business, you can perform other analysis. Ratio of receivables to original sales. What was our original sales and what is the receivables? Receivables variance. What was the budgeted period of collection and what is the actual collection? Variance. The difference between the actual and the expected. You can perform this analysis. So after that, if there are past dues, there must be collecting efforts. The main objective of receivable management is taking an appropriate action to collect the dues. So there are different activities that we can perform to collect past due receivables. Our starting point must be diplomatic. For example, you can have periodic reminder mailing. The initial credit period is 30 days and you are remaining with these days, you can remind them. Or if on the due date, you can write formal letter, or we can call it dumming, formal letter. The due date is 2 days, so you have to pay this amount to the company, formal letter, or you can have personal visit by the credit manager. The credit manager of your company can have personal visit with the buyer company. And if these options are not possible, you can initiate formal legal action. So try to be diplomatic, try to have good relationship with customers. But if these issues are not possible, you can have the formal legal action. Okay, if the collection, so this action should be optimized, not too strict, not too lenient. Not too strict, not too lenient. If you are becoming too lenient, it will affect your relationship with your customers. I mean, if you are too strict, it will affect your company's relationship with customers. If you are too lenient, the risk of uncollectability will be high. So not too strict, not too lenient. So if collection is to be outsourced, sometimes there are companies that will collect receivables on behalf of another company. For example, your company will have receivables, and there will be another company who can handle this receivables. So we call this factoring of receivables, and we call companies doing this factoring agents. So if it is outsourced, the factoring company or factoring agents play this role, the above roles. So the optimal credit policy is striking on the carrying cost and the opportunity cost. There is cost in the y-axis. There is amount of credit extended in the x-axis. If you are increasing, if the credit sales is low, your total sales will be low. This is what we call it, the opportunity cost. Lost sales as a result of the absence of credit sales. If there is no increase in credit sales, the total sales will decline. This is the opportunity cost. Lost sales because of avoiding credit sales. At the same time, if we are increasing, in other words, if we are increasing the credit sales, extending credit period, opportunity cost will decline. Opportunity cost will decline. At the same time, carrying cost will increase. The cost of managing those receivables. So the appropriate or the optimal credit policy is a policy that will strike a balance between the carrying cost and the opportunity cost. Or in other words, there is increase in sales as a result of credit sales. There is increase in carrying cost as a result of credit sales. So we have to balance this. We have to balance this. This is the optimal credit policy. So we have seen receivables here, and we'll see cash and other current assets in our tomorrow's class. If you have any question, you can ask. If you have any question.
Okay, I'm so sorry, doctor. This graph is not clear for me. I was trying to see something.
This one?
Yeah,
no.
This graph, yeah.
Are you clear with what do you mean by opportunity cost? Lost sales as a result of avoiding credit sales. Credit sales ከሌለን ሽያጭ ይቀንሳል። ስለዚህ ክሬዲት ባለመስጠታችን ምክንያት የምናጣው ሽያጭ ነው opportunity cost. So if we increase the credit sales,
Doctor, can I assume this one in case of especially bank's credits? I was assuming that part.
In bank case, it is the same, but somehow there is difference. We are talking about short-term assets in a business organization context. But you can continue. You can ask. In bank case, for example.
Taking this scenario in banks, what will be its carrying cost and opportunity costs?
Okay, if the bank is not providing loan, for example, there is no income. The main source of income for banks is from loan, interest income, right? So if there is no credit, interest income will be low. That is opportunity cost. Lost interest income as a result of avoiding, or as a result of the absence of credit, right? Credit ካልሰጠ interest income አያገኝም. Are you with me?
Yeah, I'm with you.
That is opportunity cost. Lost income as a result of avoiding credit. But if there is increase in credit, an increase in credit period, there will be interest income, right? So the opportunity cost will decline. But at the same time, carrying cost, credit to manage ለማድረግ የሚወጣው cost እየጨመረ ይሄዳል. Am I clear?
Yes, it's clear.
ስለዚህ advantage አለው, disadvantage አለው. Advantage የopportunity cost የሚለውን ላውጣልህና በባንክ ኬዝ አድቫንቴጁ ኢንካሙ ነው። ኢንትረስት ኢንካም ይጨምራል። at the same time ግን ክሬዲቱን ማኔጅ ለማድረግ የምናወጣው ኮስትም ይጨምራል። ስለዚህ ሁለቱን ያመጣጠነ ሁለቱ ክሮስ የሚደራረጉበት ፖይንት ሌቭል ይሄ ሌቭል ኦፍ ክሬዲት ነው ትክክለኛው ነው። Is that clear?
Yes, it's clear.
Okay.
May I add one question regarding to the credit eligibility criteria, the 5 criteria.
Okay.
When we come to our nation's context, even though the science says so, but practically I think the most important factor, especially within the financial institutions, will be the collateral one. They will assume collateral as a very important part than the capital, the character, the capacity, and the condition. I think it looks like that one. I think I know even collateral is the first. But
it seems. But
yeah.
Yes, you are right. It seems that all are important. That's why banks require financial statements. Banks require financial statements to see the capital, the financial position. Even they assess the bank's relationship with their customer. Even they access the customer's relationship with other banks. There is a database, central database, the National Bank of Ethiopia. Even though the collateral seems the most important, all factors must be considered, even in our country. But your view is right, I understand that. Because if there is collateral, if there is default, it is easy to sell that collateral. So the risk is low if there is collateral. That is why they emphasize on collateral. When the collateral seems the most important, all must be satisfied in bank case.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If you have another question. Okay, if you have no, please read the remaining part and we'll have discussion in our tomorrow's class. There are some calculations, try to see them, and we will continue in our tomorrow's class. Have a good one.
Hello,
Okay.
Doctor.
Yes.
May I add one question regarding to the today's currency change? We all know the current the money in circulation or the currency in circulation in our country have been more than 100 billion around, they said informally or formally, I don't know, more than 113 billion today.
For what? For printing the currency?
No, for printing that it's around we incur a cost of 3.7 billion. But what I am saying is the currency in circulation in our country is estimated to be 113 billion. What does it mean? Just meaning what economic impact does it have to our nation?
To change
and
the currency?
What it can not to change, but 113 billion amount of currency in circulation, meaning which is out of banks. Which is out of banks means what?
We call this monetary policy. That means the government must control the amount of money circulation in the economy. The economy's producing capacity must be balanced with the money circulated. Otherwise, there will be inflation and deflation. For example, if the amount of money compared with the goods produced in the country is high, there will be inflation. And you can imagine the effect of inflation. If the reverse is true, there will be deflation. And to control inflation and deflation, the currencies must be in the economic system, in banks, that means. If the money is out of the bank, it is difficult to implement monetary policy in the country. For example, if the government wants to control inflation, loan will be restricted. So banks will not give loan to business and other customers. Simply the amount of money circulation in the economy will be controlled by collecting money, and by the government sometimes sell treasury bills to collect money into the bank. But if the money is out of the control of the government, if the money is circulating out of the banking system, it's not possible to control or to implement the monetary policy. መንግስትን ፖሊሲ ኮንትሮል መፈጸም አይችልም። ከብሩ ከኢኮኖሚክ ሲስተም ወይም ከባንኪንግ ሲስተሙ የወጣ ከሆነ ኢንፎርማሊ የሚጠቀሙበት ከሆነ በጣም ከባድ ነው የሚሆነው። ለምሳሌ የብር መጠን አንሷል ብሎ መንግስት ወደ ኢኮኖሚው ቢያስገባ ኢንፍሌሽን ይፈጠራል። ብሩ አብዛኛው ኢንፎርማሊ ከሆነ የሚንቀሳቀሰው በአገሪቱ ላይ መንግስት ምንም አይነት የኢኮኖሚ ማሻሻያ ቢያደርግ ብሩ ይህን ያህል አለኝ ብሎ ስለሚወስን ብሩ ግን አክቹአሊ ማይንቀሳቀስ ከሆነ ኢኮኖሚው ላይ ምንም አይነት ፖሊሲ ኢፌክቲቭ አይሆንለትም ማለት ነው። ለምሳሌ ኢንፍሌሽን ለመቀነስ ባንኮች ተከልክለዋል ብድር እንዳይሰጡ። ነገር ግን ብሩ በዛ በኩል የሚንቀሳቀስ ከሆነ ከባንክ ውጭ ከሆነ ምንም እንኳን መንግስት የሆነ ህግ ቢያወጣም ህጉ አልሰራም ማለት ነው ኢፌክቲቭ። If you are interested about this issue, it is better to read monetary policy issues.
Thank you very much.
Monetary policy ነው የምንለው።
Clarity.
መንግስት እንዴት አድርጎ የብርን መጠን በመቆጣጠር የሀገሪቱን ኢኮኖሚ ማነቃቃት ይችላል የሚለውን ነው የሚያወራው ዋናው። ከባንክ ውጭ ከሆነ ይሄ ሞኔታሪ ፖሊሲ የተባለው ነገር አይሰራም ማለት ነው። ለምሳሌ ምንም እንኳን ባንኮች እንዳያበድሩ ቢልም ወይም ብር ከዚህም ያህል በላይ እንዳይወጣ ቢልም ነገር ግን ብሩ ኢንፎርማሊ በዛ በኩል እየተንቀሳቀሰ ነው። ስለዚህ የዋጋ ንረት እየመጣ ነው ማለት ነው። ስፔኩሌሽን አይደል? ፕላስ የሴኩሪቲ ኢሹ ይኖረዋል ብዙ ነው። ከፋይናንሻል ሲስተሙ ከወጣ ገንዘብ አስቸጋሪ እንትናል። ሰፋ ያለ ስለሆነ አክቹአሊ እዚህ ጋር መጨረስም አንችልም። I hope አይዲያዬን ተረድተኛል።
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have another question? Okay. If you have no, have a good night.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay, thank you, Doctor.